Fazil.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Lens Logic podcast. I'm your host, Fazil. We're in Dallas, Texas. Actually, technically we're in Plano, Texas, and I'm doing a shoot tomorrow for a client. And I hadn't had time to get to this podcast in Florida, so I decided I was going to do it here in Dallas. I have a buddy of mine who I've talked about on the podcast before, and I'll talk about him again today. So I had him listen to the first couple of episodes, and he actually said they were really good, but he had a couple of questions for me. I don't know if I told this story or not. A couple of months ago, I got a call from a friend named Danny, and he's a homeowner. One of the things he's doing is called house hacking, where you buy a house and you live in part of it and you renovate part of it and use that as an Airbnb, and that essentially pays for your mortgage, and then you use that to save up for a second house, and you move out of the first house and you rent both of them as Airbnbs while you live in the second one and renovate the second one. So he had renovated part of his house, the basement, and he had said to me, like, hey, I'm going to hire a photographer to do some new updated space photos for the Airbnb website. And I found 4 of them that I've gotten referrals from or found on websites, and I wanted you to look at them and see which one you thought would be the best. Now, I'm a photographer, and I don't usually go around hiring other photographers, but that doesn't mean I don't know a thing or two about photography. So I assume that's why he called me. So he sent me 4 profiles. So I looked into them deeper, and I noticed that all 4 of the photographers were pretty much the same. Their portfolios looked similar. It was kind of hard to tell. It was kind of hard to make a decision, really, like snap judgment, which one I would choose. And I looked at their Instagrams, and I looked at as much as I could find. And I noticed that there were 2 photographers that I said, okay, I'd probably pick one of these people. One was a girl, one was a guy. I called him and I said, hey, I would choose these 2. And he said, okay, I want to know why. And I said, well, one of them, their portfolio is significantly better across the board, meaning like all of their images that they have are all up to a certain level. Like the baseline of that portfolio is so much better than the baseline of the other ones. The second one, which was the girl, I said the reason I picked her was because I really liked her style. And even though her photos were not amazing, they were pretty good. They were styled really well. And so that was why I chose those 2. He told me that one of them was the most expensive and one of them was the least expensive. I don't remember which was which, honestly, but I don't think that's the point, because he ended up not choosing one of the photographers that I picked. He chose a different one. I was really skeptical about the one that he chose because we discussed him. I just didn't buy it. His portfolio looked like too perfect. It's hard to explain. I just got a sense that he just wasn't the guy. He happened to be the cheapest one. Danny picked him. And a couple of weeks goes by and he calls me and says, hey, what do you think of these? And he sends them to me and I look at them and they look really bad. And he told me, well, I didn't pick the guy or the girl that you picked. One of the reasons why he didn't want to pick the girl was because she had like a month turnaround time and he needed them much quicker. So he got the photos. They weren't good. I said, well, let the guy edit them first, because you never know what you can do with the magic of editing. The main point that I was going to try to get him to understand, which was honestly a little bit too late, I should have gotten him to understand this before he hired the photographer, was that you're not hiring a photographer for their images that they've produced in the past. Did they luck into getting those photos? Did they get inserted into the absolutely perfect situation where they were just flourishing as a photographer? And that's why their portfolio was so amazing. Have they ever been challenged in their life? Because I'll tell you, those experiences will humble you really quick. If you have a client like that, you're going to have to lean on your muscle memory while you're handling 15 other things. Those are the kind of things you need to look at. And those are the things that, to me, are very important. I've seen a lot of good photographers out there with a lot of good portfolios. For instance, I did a big editing job for a major fashion brand last year, and I was on a crunch. I was on a deadline, and I didn't think I was going to be able to finish all of the photos by the deadline. So I reached out to our good friends on Fiverr and on Upwork, and I spent probably 2 full days scouring portfolios, interviewing candidates, and I settled on 3. One was a dude from England who lived in Malaysia, I believe. I hired the English dude because he was really cool and he had a really nice portfolio. He sent me his edits and he sent it to me way too fast. And looked at them and I said, okay, they look pretty good, but I couldn't really tell what he did. So I said, can you send me the Photoshop files? When I opened those up and looked at what he did, I mean, it literally was like when you give your little cousin a coloring book and you try to get him to color this part red and they just scribble all over the lines and just color outside of the lines all over the place. That's what this was like. And it was so bad that I actually had to fire this guy off the job, and I had to get the money refunded from Upwork because I messaged him. I said, bro, you cannot put your portfolio on Upwork if this is your skill level. And you can't have a portfolio. I don't know where you got that. I'm pretty sure he stole the images from the portfolio. I'm pretty sure they weren't his. You have to be able to predict this kind of thing, and you have to have an out for this kind of things. So obviously experience really helps. In this case with my friend Danny, I just got a vibe for the two people that I mentioned. And if he was smart, he would have just hired one of those two people. I think it worked out fine. I think he got what he needed. He would have been in a better situation and gotten better assets had he listened to me in the first place. So that's a lesson to learn. Now, when I was talking to Danny about this podcast last week, he mentioned a couple more things that he really liked to know. So I'm going to try to delineate this in a way so that it's understandable for photographers as well as clients who might try to be hiring photographers. Let's talk about basics. The first thing you want to do as a photographer is you want to expose. And that means let enough light into the camera so that you can actually see an image on the screen. And the second part would be to obviously make it pretty. So once you figured out how to click all the buttons and the knobs on the camera to like make a photo so that it's not overexposed or really, really bright or underexposed, really, really dark, what you do is you start tinkering with using the light to make your image pretty. So the first thing everybody wants to do is they want their image really brightly lit. They want everything evenly filled with light. Now, the problem with that is there's no style in that. There's no aesthetic to that. And it flattens out the image really bad. When you don't have shadows, you don't have texture, you don't have 3 dimensions. So it ends up looking very flat. So once you get past that, you want to start learning how to light with quality. I just pulled up IMDb, the list of most beautiful / best looking / best lit movies. Number 1 is Seven with Brad Pitt. Number 2 is Fight Club. Dune, the most recent iteration of Dune. If you look at the images from that movie, they're beautiful. The quality of light on those are fantastic. Another good one would be Inception. The lighting in those movies are incredible. And when you learn that photography is an art in the sense that you're trying to communicate something in an image, whether it's an emotion, whether it's an object, there's something you're communicating, and you use lighting and composition to communicate those things. I mean, I can give you an analogy to, an artist. When you just look at the canvas, you just get what they're saying. They don't use words. They're just using an image. And if you can use lighting to create an image that allows you to communicate, that helps you communicate, that's the quality of light. For me, when I do my portraits, I always have a beautiful location, and I always set up my location so it looks interesting, but so that it doesn't detract from the person I'm photographing. That's one major thing you want to do. Another thing is you want to light the person. I personally don't want it to look like it was lit with a flash. I want it to look like it was lit naturally. Like somehow we just went into this room and it looked amazing. And I've gotten a lot of comments on my Instagram from other photographers saying, oh yeah, you just use basic lighting, which is like, you obviously don't know anything about lighting if you think I just use basic lighting, because basic lighting is throwing a flash up here. So what I try to do is I try to make it look like in the photo that I'm taking, the light came from natural sources. Like instead of a flash being there, maybe it's a big window, and the viewer will never know that, oh, they put a light there. Whereas some photographers I see all over the place on Instagram, actually you can tell, oh, there's a huge flash right in front of them. And now sometimes that's good. Sometimes if you're doing a super artificial looking style, that might be okay. But when I do my portraits, I very much go for the natural look. And so with that takes a little bit of understanding, that takes a little bit of knowledge, and it takes a little bit of practice before you can get to the level of being able to light a scene in that way. That's kind of what I mean by quality of light. Another thing I wanted to talk about today, and it's very funny and very timely that this would come up, but my last podcast episode was with Abby, and we talked all about social media and how that can enhance your business, enhance your footprint out in the world, which really hits home to me right now because Always at this time of year, I always take December off because there's just not usually a lot of things happening right before Christmas. Most of my clients are deep into Christmas. But around the end of the year and beginning of the year, I go crazy promoting, and I send out Instagrams, and I send out emails, and I send out postcards, and I send out emails, and I just try to get as much out as I can. That includes now the podcast. It also includes Instagram stories that I've been harboring and just have been too lazy to put out. This last 2 weeks, I've really been hitting the streets. When I say the streets, I mean Instagram, with a lot of content. And I've been pushing it out, and I've been getting a lot of feedback. And randomly, I just started getting calls from clients from here, from there. Hey, I saw you on Instagram. Hey, you got referred to me by this person. And it just goes to show you that I think what Abby and I were talking about in the last podcast kind of proved itself in real life for me. In that last interview, it was more theoretical, and I feel like every time I apply my theoreticals, they prove themselves out to me in real life, and I'm still amazed. I shouldn't be amazed, but I'm still amazed by this. And so I just started getting an inflow of communication from clients and from prospective clients. So just as a reminder to you guys who are out there who are running your own businesses, I think it's a good idea to use Instagram, TikTok, and other social media platforms to really get your message out there. And if not your message, at least your face. Because like I was telling Abby, hey, remember, it's me. I do photography. The thing is, people forget. People don't equate stuff like you think they might equate. So always getting your message out there on a repetitive basis. Hey, it's me. Hey, I do this. I bake cakes. Look at my cake. Whatever it may be, the people out there need a reminder because they forget about this stuff. I have a friend who moved to Florida, and she bakes cookies, and they're vegan, and they're all like clean ingredients, and she markets them to like health food type people. And every single day I go on Instagram, I see a post from her about her cookies. She's over here at this market today. Like, she's always posting her location. She's always in your face. Hey, remember me, remember me, remember me. And I think that's interesting because if you look at like top businesses that exist in this world, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Apple, they all advertise repetitively. Like every single company that you see in a Super Bowl ad is a established brand. They're not like, hey, I'm Jimmy Bob Farmer who's trying to sell my steaks for a majority speaking. They're established businesses that are just like, hey, we know you're going to drink soda, and when next time you drink soda, think of Coke. Or, hey, I know you eat fast food, and when you're hungry and you're running late because you have a meeting, think of McDonald's. And so we have to kind of adapt these same policies and these same mindsets and these same tactics that these bigger companies use. And social media is the easiest thing to do because your friends should be hiring you. They should be paying you full rate. They should be the first people hiring you because they know you. You should be trustworthy, and they should know you're trustworthy. So let that be an exclamation point and proof of concept of what we talked about on the last vlog. Now let's talk about the last sales call I had. I actually recorded the call for research purposes because I was really curious to see if I would do a good sales call or if I was going to crap the bed. And I'm pretty sure I crapped the bed. I feel like I have more trouble with people that I know, with clients that I've already shot, than with brand new people. Because with brand new people, I'm just like, I don't know you. I have to ask you a million questions. What do you do? What's your business? How do you want to be featured? Like what type of vibe and tone and lighting, moody, dark, colorful, playful. So I'm asking questions to determine stuff. And in that, we bring up our own knowingness of each other versus this kind of like assumed understanding that I have with a previous client that maybe I haven't talked to in 2 or 3 years, who's maybe only chatted with me on Instagram here and there. This client and I got on the other day, and I shot him in 2020, I think. It's almost as if like it was like an awkward conversation because neither of us really knew where to start and what to do. And I kind of let him start running the conversation, and which is never a good idea. But I think the whole point I'm bringing this up is that it's a constant continuation. Sometimes you're in a frame of mind where you're relaxed. Sometimes you're in a frame of mind where you're jittery, you're on the edge. Did you just talk to your sister and she upset you, or your wife, or your kid was screaming in the other room? Or did you just have an amazing day with an amazing shoot and you're just like, everything's going right? So I think from now on, I think I'm going to find a preparatory thing to do before I get on a client call, because this morning I had one that actually went really well. I guess it's just probably a good idea to mentally get yourself into a space where you're feeling good before you jump on a client call, because I think I did kind of crap the bed on that last one. So my friend Rufus asked me, what kind of equipment do you use for your photography? That's a valid question, even though it's not a great question. I'm under the impression that, there's a whole slew of photographic equipment out there, lighting, camera, lenses. And the people who tend to think that those are like really, really, really important usually are the ones that are on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of skill level of a photographer, which is why they say, what kind of equipment do you use? Meaning, what kind of equipment can I buy that will make me as good as you? What I tell people who are up and coming is I say, listen, go get a camera that's used, that maybe not the best camera, but it also is not a piece of garbage. Go buy some cheap lights that you can use. Don't rely on your equipment being amazing to make you an amazing photographer. Figure out how to be a good photographer with crappy gear. And then when you add amazing gear to your repertoire, you will be even better of a photographer. And that's a pretty good rule to follow, because if you rely on your good equipment, you're relying on luck, essentially. You're not relying on your skill. If you throw up a $1,500 light versus a $200 light and it kind of saves you, you may get into a situation later where that type of light, whether it's an expensive one or a cheap one, isn't going to matter, and you might not know what to do, and you might end up having a crappy photo shoot, and your client might be upset at you. So the best case scenario would be whatever equipment you have, learn how to use that really, really well until you know it like the back of your hand, and then start upgrading slowly once you start making some money. My friend Nick in Arizona says, how do you handle unexpected challenges or difficult lighting situations? That's a good question, actually. I've been in a lot of different places with a lot of different challenges and a lot of different scenarios. And the only way that you can ever really learn what to do in that scenario is to be faced with that scenario. And so if you roll up into a client's office or home and they have a particular set of circumstances, maybe they like their walls painted black and now you have a really, really dark room and your light doesn't reflect. Or maybe it's dingy. Maybe they have like, instead of having pure white walls, it's like a slight tint of green, and that's like ruining your photos. All of these situations are situations that you may get into during your scope of work. And so you don't have to kind of go through every situation, but I feel like you have to get through enough situations so that you've come across enough problems so that your understanding of lighting is sufficient enough so that you get to the point where you can run into any situation, and even though you may not have run into that situation before, you can still figure it out pretty quickly. Also, one thing that happened to me when I first started photographing is I had this idea that I knew lighting, and I really didn't. I mean, I knew a little bit, but it was not great. And I would get into these situations where I'd go, I'm just going to put it light like this and do this. And then I would take a photo and look at my screen, and it's not even close to what I'd want. And I didn't know lighting well enough, so I didn't know what to do. And then the client sitting there looking at me like, just waiting for me to get my lighting set up down. Okay. And I'm like, oh, let me just do this. I'm trying to pretend like I know what I'm doing. And then you see me moving the light here and then over here and then around there. And I'm doing 15 things. And at some point the client starts going like, what is this guy doing? And then I start really panicking. And so that becomes a problem when you actually don't know lighting. Nowadays, I can take as long as I want, because it might be because I can't figure out this particular situation, not because I don't actually know lighting. And I'm strong enough in my knowledge. A client looking at me funny is not going to throw me off. And I'm just going to say, sorry, give me an extra minute. This is kind of a tricky situation I'm trying to figure out. And usually they're like, okay, cool. And then obviously I have my screen there to show them so that they can see the photo. And I go, here, look, well, what do you think of this? And then they look and they go, oh my God, this looks amazing. And so that kind of quells any frustration or procrastination that they may have had in the first place. This is not a question, but here's something that I thought about that I really want to bring up. And that is that sometimes clients call me. One of the questions that they ask me sort of in our sales discussions is, how many photos do I get? And I started looking into this, and I've heard from many, many people now that there are photographers out there who say, okay, for this price, you get this many photos. For this price, you get this many photos. For this price, you get this many photos. I guess it makes sense, honestly, why they would do something like that. but I'm not in agreement with that at all. To me, what those photographers are doing is they're putting a price point in front of a sale. They're making it more about the price point and not about the work that's being done. Now, this is, to me, is a problem because it makes the rest of us who don't do that look bad. Now, the reason I don't do that is because I want to get a client comfortable in front of the camera. I have to shoot this client who's not used to being shot in front of a camera. That's not their job to be a model. They're a business person, and their job is to be a business person. They just happen to have to take photos to promote their business. So getting their attention on the number of photos or the amount keeps their attention stuck on that, and that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the photographers in the world. That's not good for the clients, and that's definitely not good for you if you're a photographer and doing this. I understand that there are cheap clients out there who only need such and such. You say, oh, I only want 2 photos. But the thing is if you're a good salesman and you can actually get the client to understand it's more about the quality and the assets that they have, then you're going to be a better photographer and a better business person. Casey from Newport Beach says, are there any tips you have for a person who's getting a photo shoot done in terms of preparation? Casey, yes. I've got a couple tips for you. A lot of people don't give enough importance or attention to the fact that they have a photo shoot. They think, oh God, this is something I just have to do, and let's just get through it and move on with it. But here's the thing. The more that you participate in the photo shoot, the more you'll get out of the photo shoot. And the reason for that is because, think about it. If I say, hey, I have a photo shoot tomorrow and this guy's coming to shoot me, and I just, go out tonight and get drunk and eat a bunch of salty foods, and I wake up tomorrow and I look hungover and my skin's greasy and I'm all puffy, how is that going to help me look good in a photo? I'm sure clients out there would probably get mad at the photographer for doing something like that. But the truth of the matter is that's no, you have to be prepared. There's a couple things to think about. First of all, do you need a shave? Do you need to get your nails done? Do you need to do a spray tan, get a haircut, get a shave, get your eyebrows done? All of these things can add up to a really, really nice photo shoot. Photoshop is great. Photoshop is magic. But at some point when you start having the editor correct too many things, it starts looking like a wax figure rather than a person. And I'm even talking about like the best retouchers in the world. If you think about it, name any super famous actress. When they get shot for the cover of Vogue or Vanity Fair, they are the most beautiful people in the world, and they still get retouched by the best retouchers. And this is after all of those things that I mentioned. So if you as a normal person are having a photo shoot, the best thing to do is think with all of those things and make sure you get them done before the photo shoot, and so that there's no residual effects left for the photo shoot. Like for instance, if you're going to get microbladed, I know there's sort of a period of healing in microblading. You don't want to do that the day before you do a photo shoot. You want to do that like a week before. If you're going to get Botox or filler, you need to understand the healing times of those. You need to do that enough in advance so that you're camera ready by the time the photographer arrives. Okay, and last question. Do you have any suggestions on presets or filters that I can use to make my photos look pretty? Great question. And it's very personal to me also. When I first started doing photography, there was this thing that was super popular called VSCO, VSCO. And those were like the most popular quote unquote filters. Now let's just scale this back. What a filter is a piece of glass that you put on your lens that does something to the light going in the camera. That's what a filter is. So what these people nowadays are talking about when you have like Instagram filters, they're not really filters. They're more presets, meaning each of like the little settings that you do when you edit a photo, it's preset. So that you add that to any photo, it's going to put the same setting on each photo. When I first started photographing, the thing that was super trendy and super popular was VSCO. And they had these filters, quote unquote, that were for sale, and they were like $150 or $200 for their set of like I don't even remember how many there were, but I was really close to buying them, probably about 5 times, but I just couldn't push myself over the edge. And the reason for that was because I knew that if I bought those, I would use them as a crutch and not learn what all those little sliders did. What does the contrast do? What does the exposure do? What does that mean? What are the difference? Why are there so many sliders? So I didn't buy those filters. There are so many photographers, some of them are my colleagues, I'm not going to name any names, but are very dependent on their presets or filters. We're going to call them presets. And they're very dependent on their presets. But that's not good because it's a crutch. Just because you have good presets does not mean you're a good photographer. I could scour the internet and find the best presets in the world, and take the worst photos and put those presets on them. And that's not going to make me a better photographer. This whole new thing of making everything look like 70s and blurry. You know where that probably came from? That probably came from a photographer who was not a good photographer and did something really wrong and then had a happy accident and gave it to his client. And then I was like, oh, this is a new thing. That is not a thing. That is amateur hour. That is not good. It's going to last for 5 minutes and then it's going to be out of style. And then what will you do? So the point is this. Do not rely on your presets to save you. Be a really good photographer, know lighting, add your presets to add some style to it to make your photos stand out from other people's. But ultimately, be a good photographer first. All right, guys. Well, that's enough ranting today. I think I've given you guys enough to chew on. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. It probably was, honestly. I'm not a comedian. That's not what I do. What I do is talk about photography and marketing. If you guys have any questions about this, shoot me a DM on Instagram, send me an email, reply to me on YouTube on comments. And I actually have 2 or 3 episodes set up with really, really interesting guests who have their own podcasts. So it'll be like a kind of a cross-platform thing. It'll be kind of fun. Anyways, can't wait for that. See you then. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fazil podcast. If you'd like to know more, you can check out my website at www.fazillah.com. That's FAZILLAH.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fazillah.photo. Stay tuned for more episodes where I'll discuss photography and how it relates to life, marketing, and other subjects as well.